Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. As part of a comprehensive news analysis, today we'll be discussing 6 important articles out of the Hindu newspaper, Delhi edition. But before we begin, a very important announcement for you that till 30th of May, we are having a very important mega scholarship program under which you can get up to 60% off on our online classroom program. Further, guaranteed 50,000 discount will be there for everyone who applies before 30th. And you can see there's a bottom bar which is going to tell you, and you can register to the link provided in the comments itself. And don't miss this chance if you want to join our family with regards to your UPSC preparation. So with this, let's look at the 6 topics we are going to discuss today. The first one is a very important judgment which has come from the Supreme Court about jallikattu. And it's an interesting judgment because for the first time, cultural tradition has been quoted by the Supreme Court, and we'll talk about the timeline, how it has spanned out, what is this important cultural form from Tamil Nadu, and we'll see how they tried to bypass the regulations of the Supreme Court and the tussle between the Supreme Court and the state and the concept of culture. Thereafter, a very interesting article about a tightrope which India is walking as of right now, vis-a-vis trying to balance 2 different parts of the world, and how being the G20 leader president in that regard, it has become quite a difficult task to balance both. Thereafter, a very important concept, green deposits, and RBI has put in certain regulations with regards to that. And then 3 very simple but straightforward topics related to e-Malkhana. Thereafter, an operation Dhvast. And last but not the least, the new parliament is going to be announced in the next 9 to 7 days, and that is going to be very significant in the history of infrastructure and generally our cultural history when it comes to constitutional development and institutions related to it. So 6 interesting, straightforward articles, but important for your preparation generally. So good morning to all of you, and I think we all are comfortable and we can start this session. So the first is a very important judgment which has come from the Supreme Court, wherein jallikattu, a type of bovine sport, has now previously banned by the Supreme Court in 2014 itself. The Supreme Court has now removed that ban and actually upheld an amendment to the PCA Act, which is the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act itself. And the most important aspect here is that they use the word cultural heritage and tradition of people. It has quoted that it's a century-old tradition, therefore it's a cultural heritage and tradition coming out of Tamil Nadu, and we need to honor that in that regard. But what is more important for you is that to understand the larger picture here. The larger picture is that what is Jallikat? Thereafter, we need to understand what is the timeline of how it has been litigated about, and then what is the change now. So it's a very important sport which happens, or a tradition which happens. It's a bull taming sport traditionally played in Tamil Nadu as part of the Pongal harvest festival. It has its dangers and it is a contested concept because of the fact that animal rights groups and certain courts and even the Supreme Court at one point of time expressed the fact that it is a dangerous sport. It is also cruelty to animals. It also leads to certain death of men and even the bull itself, and therefore there was this angle that there are 2 basic aspects here. First related to animal cruelty, and second related to the danger it is to the men and women who are involved in this basic sport itself. Now, it's a very important tradition. Generally for your art and culture current affairs it becomes important because you need to know about jallikattu, therefore you need to know about it generally. But what is even more interesting and important is how has it been legislated about, because that gives you a certain understanding of how it has been a contested concept even when it comes to courts. So in 2006, the bench of the Madurai High Court gave directions that you need to regulate the conduct of jallikattu because it is a little bit dangerous that way, so you need to regulate it. So in 2009, the state then passed what is called the Tamil Nadu Regulations for Jallikattu Act 2009 to impose a certain amount of conditions to protect the animals and the people who are involved. However, then in November of 2010, the Supreme Court also allowed the Tamil Nadu government to allow Jallikat to happen for 5 months in a year, and the Supreme Court directed the collectors to ensure that the bulls were registered with the Animal Welfare Board of India. So as to make sure that the animal was also in a way protected via the Animal Welfare Board of India. However, after 2011, these courts changed their stance itself. So in 2011, the center issues a ban on any form of sport, specifically bull sport, where they are performing any certain kind of activity. So banning use of bull in performing animals. So therefore, bull cannot be used in any form of tradition where there is performance, there's a concept of performativity. Now, in 2014, the Supreme Court will then ban jallikattu altogether, saying that it is a dangerous sport, it is cruelty to animals. But once the center notifies that we want to lift the ban itself and says bulls may be continued to be used for exhibiting or training of performing animals at events such as jallikattu, the Supreme Court still uphold its ban in that regard. And therefore, in 2017, the Tamil Nadu government then amended its Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act in order to give an exception to jallikattu itself. So the story is quite interesting because till 2011, it was considered to be something permitted within the concept of performativity, that it's an animal performing something within a tradition, so therefore it is allowed. But after 2011, once the center changed its stance, then the Supreme Court changed its stance, then the center again changed its stance in 2016. And there was a lot of protest during this period with regards to how jallikattu should be seen, and therefore it is this recent run which is very, very important for you for generally GS paper 1 and 2. So you need to understand how the 2014 judgment was worded and how the 2017 Tamil Nadu government amendment was then challenged in the Supreme Court, which has now been upheld. So till this point, whatever I told you is basically it's a tradition coming out of Tamil Nadu. It is related to bulls and it's a bull taming sport in that regard. There is a long tradition of it being under scrutiny of legislation. When we talk about from 2006 to 2016, 10 years it was up and down certain understanding with regards to how the bulls should not be harmed in a way, and the men and women who are involved should also not lose their life in that regard. So regulation was very, very important. But the 2014 judgment which was used for 2016 banning also was very important because the Welfare Board of India versus A. Nagaraja case, remember the name because this can be now quoted in GS paper 2 itself. The Supreme Court bench under K.S. Radhakrishnan and P.C. Ghosh ruled that the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act 1960 overshadows and overrides the so-called tradition and culture. Now this is the basic point. Here it says that an act or piece of legislation can override culture and tradition and advise the parliament to elevate the rights of animals to that of constitutional rights so as to protect their dignity and honor. So here 2014, please remember they are very straightforward saying that tradition and culture comes under law and it needs to be regulated and animal rights are equally important, therefore it should be a constitutional right in that regard. This meant that bulls cannot be used as performing animals either in jallikattu or any other sport, which meant that Kambala, which is related to the tradition of Karnataka and other sports also in Maharashtra, came under the fold, and therefore any sport in which bulls were involved, in which they had to perform a certain task, now were under scrutinization and the scanner itself. So in 2017, to evade this judgment, the Tamil Nadu government amended the PCA Act to allow jallikattu in the state itself, and the amending act sought to preserve the cultural heritage of Tamil Nadu and to ensure the survival and well-being of native breeds of bulls. Because in jallikattu, native breeds of bulls are used, they said it's a very important tradition within India to protect our own breeds of bulls in that regard. So you see, 2014, there's a very straightforward saying that cultural heritage or cultural traditions or tradition and culture is overridden by acts. Very important judgment in that regard. However, now they've taken a full circle. They've taken a full circle because now the 2023 judgment, which has come just yesterday, it argues that no, we want to honor tradition and culture, and therefore we will not intervene. And it has even gone to say that we are going to take all the bull performing or bull based traditions into this fold, and we allow them under it itself. So therefore this judgment is going to apply to Kambala and every other sport in which the bulls are involved. And further, it also argued a very important point, that even when it comes to the duties of the fundamental duties, even DPSP, we are saying that it is not in violation of anything, be it the DPSPs, be it the fundamental duties, even the fundamental rights in that regard. Therefore, this judgment is considered very, very important because it creates a precedence. Now, tradition and culture has been seen as overriding acts. In 2014, that was the other way around, that acts can override tradition and culture. This is a very important concept you need to understand. So, the new judgment, the 5-judge bench judgment of the Supreme Court, which came on Thursday, upheld the amendment to the legislature, the what is called Prevention of Cruelty to Act itself, and this was made by the legislatures of Tamil Nadu, Maharashtra and Karnataka to the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals PCA Act of 1960, allowing bull taming sports such as jallikattu, Kambala and other what are called bullock cart races, which all are allowed now. And it said that it upheld the validity of the Prevention of Cruelty of Animals Tamil Nadu Amendment 2017. Also, the Prevention of Cruelty Conduct of Jallikattu 2017, 2 acts which were passed by the Tamil Nadu government, and it has received the President's assent. Therefore, there is no flaw in the document itself or the law itself. And it said that we are going to now apply it to other sports also, which are applying to Karnataka and Maharashtra, and therefore everything which involves bulls is now allowed. And last but not the least, it says that the Jallikattu law substantially minimizes the pain and suffering of the animals, and therefore tradition and culture can be upheld. But what is even more significant is that it said that the 2017 judgment or the 2017 amendment by the Tamil Nadu government does not violate 51AG and 51AH, which is the duty on the Indian citizen to protect the environment and develop a scientific temper, humanism, spirit of inquiry, reform, respectively. And it also does not violate Article 14 or Article 21 of the Constitution. So first you need to know which are the 2 fundamental duties which are involved, 51A, G and H, and 14 and 21 are under its fold. So I'll try to give you a larger perspective here, and then we can just summarize everything and understand what is the judgment generally. So when we talk about this whole concept, since 2006 it is under consideration. From 2006 to 2011, there was a concept, let us regulate. Now please pay attention, I'm trying to simplify this topic for you so that you can understand it in the right way to write in a mains answer. So from 2006 to 2011, it was about regulation. Regulate and protect the animal. But from 2011 to 2014 and thereafter 2016, the concept changed. It was about ban it, and the Supreme Court and the center both wanted to do it. Center will change its stance in 2016, but the Supreme Court judgment of 2014 is going to be quite significant because it is going to argue that tradition and culture are not above acts, therefore they can be overridden by the concept of acts. So acts and the PCA Act specifically can override tradition and culture. However, 2016 was the period in which now the Tamil Nadu government saw that the Supreme Court is not going to change its stance. In 2017, it had 2 bills which were passed in its assembly, and they amended their PCA Act in that regard to give an exemption to Jallikattu. Now, since 2017 to 2023, there has been this question, should bull taming or any form of performative animal sport have bulls, and is it this concept of cruelty to animals? And therefore, 51A, G and H along with 14 and Article 21 of the Constitution came into foray, wherein it is a duty to protect animals in that regard. Now, the 2013 judgment has created a new precedence. It has argued that when it comes to tradition and culture, and if we can minimize the suffering of the animal, or there is no suffering of the animal, then that tradition can be upheld, and therefore they have overturned their own 2014 judgment, the A. Nagaraja case in that regard. Now, this is a very important concept. I cannot emphasize enough on how the Supreme Court has changed its own stance. Still till 2014, the stance, and technically 2023 till today, till yesterday in that regard, the stance was that tradition cannot override the concept of acts. Here, now tradition and culture has been given precedence because it's a century-old tradition, therefore we upheld it. So please understand this timeline, it's not difficult. 2006, the Madurai High Court was the first to take it. Thereafter, it was taken in 2009-2010 with a regulation. 2011 onwards, the concept changes, which is banning it. 2016 was the highest point where Supreme Court upheld its ban, and now we have overturned it. But the 2014 judgment was important because it argued for dignity and honor and the concept of rights of animals, and therefore 2017 judgment, the 2017 amendment rather, was equally important because now the state tried to protect its own culture, and this judgment has now changed everything with regards to this because it has upheld both these and also extended to the other states in that regard. So 2006 to 2011 regulate, 2011 to 2016 ban, 2017 Tamil Nadu is going to change its PCA Act itself, thereafter a tussle over fundamental duties and fundamental rights, and thereafter yesterday's judgment is going to change everything in that regard. So I hope that I have tried to give you a very bird's eye view of this concept, and it is totally clear in your mind on how it is a very, very important concept which has come through recently. So 2023 can be seen as a very important judgment because now it can be used for any tradition and any culture which has animals involved. So this is a very important concept wherein now acts don't override tradition and culture, but tradition and culture can prevail. So I hope that this whole concept is totally clear in your mind, the implications of this judgment itself and why it is so important in that regard. Clear, everyone? Basically, yes? Come on. Perfect. Great. So with this, we move to the second topic. The second topic is equally interesting because it is based on a very important concept which India is trying to, in a way, develop, which is balancing or being the balancing force. Now, let me give you the larger picture here as I do, and then we'll talk about the nitty-gritty. What this article is technically trying to talk about is how India is on a very, very tight line, a tight rope on which India is operating. India, as of right now, is trying to balance two worlds, wherein the G7, the G20, the Quad, over and above that, the US, its relationship with Japan. The concept is that they together, in a way, represent the West. And in a way, because Russia was removed from the G8 and it became G7 itself, there's a very strong lobby which has appeared on the other side of the story. And that can be represented by the fact that India has to host the SCO summit. Further, its relationship with Russia, China, and Pakistan. And more than that, because now the SCO has Iran in it, the fact of the matter is this is like an anti-West lobby. So the problem India right now has that it cannot abandon either. It cannot abandon the Quad, be it the US or be it the G20 or the West in that regard, because that is the way our presence in the Indo-Pacific is very, very important and it is made more significant in that regard. On the other hand, on the other side of the spectrum, the SCO is equally important because we engage with Russia, even the BRICS in that regard. The fact is we cannot leave Russia as an all-weather friend because Russia has always stood by, and as it is we have a very important defense relationship with Russia. Right now, Russian oil has become a very contagious issue. Further, Iran also, we have our port there, Chabahar, and over and above that, we also import oil from Iran. So the point is, and the article is trying to point out, is that if we are in such a tight position, that because if something happens in the Russia-Ukraine crisis, which is pro-Ukraine, for example, the EU and the US take a stand that we have to take a side, or for example, we try to pivot towards the anti-West sector, but then China, being the irritant it is, does something in the dark sector or natural sector. So the point is, India cannot go either way fully, and it has to balance. It has to balance. Now, being the G20 president, over and above that, we are hosting the SCO summit itself, and the Prime Minister is going to go for a very important visit in June into the US. It's a state visit, very significant that way. Third Indian executive to go there in that regard. And if that is not the case, India also has to host the SCO, and within the next 1 month, a very important summit in which Xi Jinping, even Vladimir Putin will come to India. And over and above that, we also have a BRICS summit which is coming. So what this article is trying to talk about is that India's position is quite difficult. And we can be a balancing force, people can follow suit with regards to that. But it is becoming increasingly problematic. It is becoming increasingly problematic to run this rope or run this tightrope in that regard. So the basic point is, what this article is trying to talk about is, if something unforeseen happens, what are called black swan events, then India would have to choose. And then the real problem emerges. So, if you look at it, India has to engage with the Quad also, with the G7 also. India also has to engage with the US. PM's very important visit to the US in that regard. But also we have in July an SCO summit in which all countries which are basically anti-West as of right now are going to be there. So when we talk about the SCO members itself, we have Russia, we have Pakistan, we have China, India, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, and Iran as the new member itself. And what is common to Iran, Russia, China is the fact that they hate the US. So the problem India has is that it has to balance this group also, and it has to balance this group also, wherein Australia, Japan, India, and US are emerging as a new quadrilateral quad in that regard. India has to balance this also. So the tightrope is that how do we run through these two different forces in that regard, pushing in the opposite direction. And therefore, the overall picture here is that the SCO represents, in a way, an anti-West feeling. And what is common to the SCO is that the grouping represents the world's population, GDP growth, energy reserves, and India has the comfort of getting what we call as the oil from Russia itself, but that is also coming under question. Further, India should be given credit. We have been, and it is the Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister who have balanced this tightrope very, very well as of right now, that we are able to engage with both, though technically it's not NAM, but it's a very beautiful modified form of non-alignment, that we are not fully going towards this area or that area. We are standing in between, not aligning fully with either. So therefore, the concept is very straightforward. The concept is that India is balancing quite a lot as of right now. Balancing means that we're trying to engage with both. But what is the concern is, if any of these events happen, India would have to choose, and we have to rethink our policy in that regard. What could happen? For example, if Ukraine gets a major upper hand, spring offensive is on. If Ukraine gets a very major upper hand against Moscow, against Russia, India would have to choose between Ukraine or Russia. Further, if we are engaging with China and China then violates the line of actual control, the LAC, and becomes an irritant either in the West or in the East, India may also be forced to rethink the way we take defense supplies because of the way Russia is acting against the NATO. Further, the US and the Europeans specifically can force a choice on us that you have to take a call. Do you want Russian oil inflows? Do you want to take Russia's stance in that regard? Or the old threat of what is called CATSA, Countering Americans' Adversaries Through Sanctions Act, it's called CATSA. We have taken S-400 missile system from Russia. That is technically not allowed because if you're under CATSA, you can't take any defense material from Russia. But we've taken it, and for a very long time, America has been talking about putting sanctions on India for this what we have acquired from the Russians. So the point here is that it's a very interesting position we are in. We are, as of right now, when we talk about the geopolitics of India and the geopolitics of the world itself, there are two camps very evidently present, West and anti-West. And the problem is that India has to balance both. So this type of articles basically give you certain understanding and something to think about. That if you look at it, India is in a very tight position. So we have the SCO, China, Russia to manage. On the other hand, we have the Quad, Japan, the US, the EU and the NATO. And India wants to engage with both because we can't trust the West because we previously did, and America is a finicky and moody power in that regard. On the other hand, we can't trust the Chinese because we can have a very good relationship with them and then they will violate the LAC. So therefore, the point is, as of right now, India is doing a very good job. But let us see how we will stand in the overall picture, which is going to emerge later. So the first article was about a very important Supreme Court judgment which has come through. And this article is a thought-provoking article. It's giving you food for thought, wherein are you able to understand India's very tight position? And if you can, there can be a question which can be made vis-a-vis how India is on a tightrope and how the geopolitics of the world is pushing and pulling India in certain directions. India has taken a very good stance. Hats off to our diplomats. Hats off to everybody who's involved. However, it will take a small event and things can go wrong very quickly. So therefore, this article is like an alarm bell. It gives you a basic alarm bell that, okay, this is the case. If we pivot either way, it can be detrimental to our politics. So I hope that you understand the basic premise of this article, which is to point out India's very precarious position and problem in that regard. If this is clear, we can move to the third article. Yes, everybody? Clear? Okay, perfect. Now comes the concept of green deposit, greenwashing, and the RBI regulations to it. Very interesting article for GS paper 3. First, let's understand what do I mean by this concept of green deposit. What is this concept of green deposit? And the concept is very simple. We all, when we invest through banks. So we can have mutual funds, we can have certain SIPs. But what if you and me are very environmentally conscious? And we want to invest only in programs which are good for the environment. So therefore, any form of investment done by you and me, by the customer or the consumer to the bank, and therefore the bank investing on your behalf into green projects, it's called green deposits. Therefore, the concept is not very different from regular deposits that bank accept from the customers. The only difference is that the bank promises to earmark the money that they receive as green deposits towards environment-friendly projects. For example, a bank may promise green deposits which will be used towards financing renewable energy projects that fight climate change. or they may not invest in fossil fuel. Therefore, an anti-fossil fuel thing could also be green in that sense. So the concept is green deposits in that regard are environmentally conscious deposits into the bank by consumers and customers, and therefore the bank is obligated to invest it into green projects. The RBI did not regulate this previously, and what was happening was what is called greenwashing. Greenwashing, a very interesting word which came, whitewashing as it is called, greenwashing, which was that the banks used to do a drama, which is that we are investing in a very, very important project, will save close to 2 trillion tons of carbon dioxide, this and that. However, when you go and see the project itself, minimal impact to environment. So the banks used to take certain deposits on the name of green deposits, but they did not invest it in the right place or in the right direction in that regard. So now the RBI saw this, and the RBI now indicated that we now need to regulate this concept because it is becoming more and more common, and the deposit amount is also quite big in that regard. So very simply, last month the RBI came up with regulations to frame for banks to accept green deposits from customers. Under the framework, the bank has to accept green deposits, will have to disclose more information and where they are investing the deposit. So there are basically 3 basic concepts and 2 basic sectors or sectorial division which the RBI has pointed out. But I hope that you understand what is a green deposit. Very simply, a deposit taken from customers specifically for investment into environment-friendly projects, and therefore it is a good initiative. Therefore, banking can also become green. But now, what the basic concept was, RBI could see that there was something called greenwashing, which refers to misleading claims of positive environmental impact of an activity. For example, a bank may advertise that their green deposits are having huge impact on the environment, but the actual impact is very, very minimal. And therefore, the RBI has now argued that if a bank comes up with this type of scheme, it would have to accept and tell everybody a set of rules and policies which needs to be approved by the respective bank boards and need to be advertised. Therefore, first make rules and regulations. Further, you have to make these rules public, so you need to advertise and tell what the bank's basic aim is. So, once you have the rules, make it public so that on websites and on different platforms, you disclose the regular information related to how much amount has come, which is deposits, further how the deposit has been allocated and towards which project it has been allocated and how much impact it has. So, you first make rules and regulations, then you advertise. What you advertise is how much has come, where are you investing it, and what is the impact. So how, where and what. And there should be a third party audit to verify that the claims made by the banks are actually substantial and right vis-a-vis their business projects. So there needs to be an audit also. So very simply, it's a very interesting development because now you need to advertise where have we put it, how much amount did we put in, what is the impact. Further, there are certain areas which the RBI has enmarked, wherein the list of sectors in which RBI has said you can apply under this green deposits include renewable energy, waste management, clean transportation, energy efficiency, and afforestation. On the other hand, where you are not allowed to put in green deposits is fossil fuels, nuclear power, very important. Nuclear power is not considered properly renewable because it has an impact, radioactivity, and the plutonium which is produced is problematic in that regard. Tobacco, gambling, palm oil, and hydropower also. Hydropower again is very interesting in this list because it means tidal power also has a major impact on the environment because that will be leads to submergence. Gravity dams have a lot of impact on, if it leads to deforestation, has a lot of impact on the environment and ecology because a lot of land goes under water, and therefore that also releases a lot of carbon dioxide. So what is more interesting is that nuclear power, according to RBI, and tidal power is not considered to be green deposits. Now, this is a very important concept for you because this can come in the examination very simply. These new terminologies, these new concepts, always important for the examination, but can be asked easily like this. Now, before I move on to the Prelims Bytes section, let me give you a summary of what we've done till this point. What we've done till this point is very simply, between 2006 to 2016, we saw how a culture tradition called jallikattu from Tamil Nadu was under consideration with first regulation, then ban, with 2011 being the cutoff date. Then we saw in 2017 how the Tamil Nadu government changed its stance and therefore it amended its PC Act, and therefore since 2017 to 2023 till yesterday, it was believed that culture and tradition is not considered important or is not overriding over acts, but acts, legislation matter more than culture and tradition. But the judgment which has come through is just the opposite of the 2014 judgment which came. 2014 said culture and tradition is not overriding. However, in 2023 they have said that culture and tradition is important, and therefore any act which tries to minimize the cruelty or what we call as pain to the animal is upheld. And therefore Jallikattu, Kambala, all the bull-based performative arts are now protected under the judgment itself. So the first discussion was about the Supreme Court judgment which came yesterday. Further, thereafter, we tried to understand the tightrope on which India is walking as of right now, wherein on one side we have the West, the US, the Quad, the G7, the EU, the NATO, and on the other we have the anti-West stance which has been taken by BRICS, specifically SCO, China, Russia, and Russia being an all-weather friend is the problem which we have. And any unforeseen development can lead to destabilization of our stance itself. The last topic which we've done right now is called green deposit and greenwashing. These are two words, please, which you have to remember, wherein green deposit concept is deposits taken from the bank invested only in green projects. Greenwashing is the concept which banks do, under which they just try to mislead the people by saying that we are putting in the money into projects which have substantial impact but don't have. And very simply, we saw the three basic regulations which have come in. First, make rules and regulations, then need to advertise it, then where, what, and how will be questioned. And if not, we also need an audit of where that money has gone and is your claim actually correct. So very important development in the schemes of what we call as banking and for economics generally, GS paper 3. So I hope that Jallikattu or the diplomatic conundrum we are in and green deposits, all three are totally clear in your mind. If it is, then we can move on to three very small straightforward topics related to prelims. Okay. So when we talk about Prelims Bytes, we know that the emphasis is totally different. It is much more what we call as factual, straightforward, what you need to know for the examination. First is very specific to Visakhapatnam, but very simply a new concept which has been introduced. It is called e-Malkhana. Now you would know that if you go to the police station for a case, there are certain things which are collected. That is called case evidence or case documents. They are kept in a place which is called Malkhana. Malkhana literally means where you have the goods place, Malkhana. Now, what the problem was that we have multiple cases, thousands, lakhs of cases. So therefore, everything got stuffed in the Malkhana. Nobody knew what was there also. So today, if I ask the police that related to this case, what are the documents which you have or what is the evidence which you have, they would not have an account of that only. And therefore, Visakhapatnam police has become the first to introduce this concept of e-Malkhana, under which everything will be digitized. And therefore, all case properties and evidences are kept in storerooms. But the problem was that there was no understanding of what was there itself. So now what is going to happen under e-Malkhana is that they are going to keep it in cardboard boxes, file everything, number everything. More than that, they are going to designate a QR code to it, and that will be pasted on the box itself. So for example, for a specific case, we will have a small QR code, and there will be a dedicated website on which all QR codes will be available to everyone. And by scanning the QR code, you are going to get to know that, okay, these documents and these things have been filed under e-Malkhana, or is in the Malkhana with the police, which is quite significant because it gives you transparency into what they are doing with regards to what is there in the Malkhana and how they are dealing with the case itself. This is a very significant development and should be applied to other polices across the states itself, and is very significant in that sense because it allows for digitization of records and also allows you and me to know what is the basic understanding vis-a-vis how they are cataloging certain things. So what you need to remember is the concept of e-Malkhana. Remember, Malkhana very simply related to the police. Thereafter, a very important term, Operation Dhvast. Dhvast is important for you because it is related to the NIA. NIA has been conducting for the past 3 to 4 days multiple raids across multiple states, and Operation Dhvast is actually against the terrorist gangster drug smugglers network in that regard, and close to 324 locations which were chosen, 129 have been searched, and except for Punjab and Haryana, Delhi, Uttar Pradesh, Rajasthan, Maharashtra, Gujarat, Chandigarh, MP, all were under consideration, and 3 people have also got arrested. Names are not important for you. The simple point is, in the examination, Operation Dhvast, if you see, just simply mark it as the concept of the NIA project under the concept of the simple gangster drug smuggling network. It's basically drug smuggling network. That is why Punjab, Haryana are also under the scanner in that regard. So, 2 simple concepts, Operation Dhvast and what we saw under e-Malkhana, 2 terms. Thereafter, the last and the most significant development, marking his 9 years in office, on 28th May, we are going to see that Prime Minister Narendra Modi is going to actually inaugurate the new Parliament building, a very significant development in our history itself. With regards to the Parliament which we used was completed in 1927 and is close to 100 years old. With regards to its infrastructure and the level of what we call as seating capacity, it is quite old in that regard. And therefore, there was a very important project which was launched. Close to 970 crores has been put in and has been implemented by Tata Projects itself, and totally indigenized project. The new building is going to be very significant, can hold 888 members of the Lok Sabha vis-a-vis 543 which it can hold today, and can hold 300 from the Raj Sabha as compared to 250 which is there today. Because it does not have a joint hall, when there will be a joint seating, it will happen in the Lok Sabha, because then the capacity can be increased to 1280. So the total capacity is actually 1280. This is very, very significant because India is also due for delimitation. So therefore the number of Lok Sabha seats are also going to increase. So the triangular, very beautiful, the new Parliament building along with the capital, which was under consideration and under controversy over the way we have installed what type of emblem in that regard. But the basic point is, just next to the old symbol of colonialism, we have a symbol of New India. And with regards to its need, it is needed. It is a very significant development in that regard. And we will wait for 28th May to actually get the real glimpse of the representation of New India, wherein India emerging as a superpower, a 3 trillion economy, have to become a 5 trillion economy, the 5th largest economy in the world. This is a true representation of Indian culture and Indian power in that regard. And very significantly, 20th May has been when the Prime Minister completes 9 years in office, it will be inaugurated. Very significant. So before I move to the mains questions, let me give you a basic summary of what we've done today. 6 topics we've covered. First was related to Jallikattu and the concept of the Supreme Court judgment which has come through, which has upheld the amendment by the Tamil Nadu government to the PCA Act, Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act. And what was quoted was, it's a century-old tradition related to culture and and what we call as traditional concepts and the identity of the state itself, and therefore it needs to be protected, has been now given to other states also which have bull-based performative arts in that regard. Thereafter, we tried to understand an interesting precarious position in India, or in which India is, which is that how we are balancing both the West and the anti-West. Then the concept of green deposits. Green deposits, very, very important because it talks about the concept of how now the banks have to be more transparent in the way they apply, and they, in a way, also they take the deposit and invest the deposit. You will know where your money is going, and more than that, there will be auditing of that. Thereafter, we went into the concept of greenwashing, that right now it is all based on this basic drama. Then 3 concepts: Operation Dhvast, e-Malkhana, and the new parliament building getting inaugurated very soon. So I hope that all topics discussed today are totally clear in your mind. If it is, then let's look at the mains questions for today. India is walking a tightrope diplomatically in the current geopolitics. Comment. This is related to how do you see the current geopolitics and where India is placed. What are green deposits? What are the RBI regulations with regards to them? So it's a very current type question, very interesting in regard to both GS paper 2 and GS paper 3, realistic question in that regard. So before I end, just want to emphasize again that we are running a very important program till 30th May, under which you will get up to 60% what we call a scholarship or discount, minimum 50,000 discount on any program you choose with regards to online and offline. So if you are considering becoming a part of the BYJU'S family, this is the right time to join us. Thank you so much. I hope all of this made sense to you. I'll be back on Monday with another set of 6 to 7 topics. For today, this is enough. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.